The Tale of Peter Rabbit. Once upon a time, in a cozy burrow beneath the roots of a grand old tree, lived a family of rabbits. Mrs. Rabbit was a kind and gentle mother who loved her 4 little bunnies dearly. Their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and the most mischievous of them all, Peter Rabbit. One morning, as the sun rose over the green meadows and wildflowers swayed in the breeze, Mrs. Rabbit called her children together. "Now, my dears," she said kindly, "you may go and play in the fields or along the path, but remember, do not go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your poor father had an unfortunate accident there, and I don't want any of you to get into trouble." Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, being good little bunnies, promised to obey their mother and hopped down the lane to gather berries. But Peter, who was always filled with curiosity and a desire for adventure, twitched his nose and thought to himself, what harm could a little peek inside the garden do? The moment his mother was out of sight, Peter ran straight toward Mr. McGregor's garden. He squeezed under the gate and found himself in a paradise of vegetables, rows of crisp green lettuce, plump red tomatoes, juicy carrots, and radishes as big as his head. "Oh, what a feast!" Peter exclaimed, nibbling on a carrot. He hopped from one row to the next, munching on a bit of cabbage, sampling some beans, and pulling up a radish or two. He was having such a grand time that he completely forgot to keep an eye out for danger. Suddenly, a deep voice growled, "Stop, thief!" Peter froze. Standing before him, with a rake in his hands and an angry scowl on his face, was none other than Mr. McGregor. "You rascal!" Mr. McGregor shouted, lunging toward Peter. Peter's heart leaped into his throat, and in a flurry of fur and paws, he dashed through the garden. He zigzagged between cabbage heads, darted under tomato vines, and scrambled over a row of onions. But in his panic, he lost his way. "Oh dear! Oh dear!" Peter panted. He spotted a shed and rushed inside, hoping to hide. But as he turned a corner, he found himself face to face with a large watering can. "This will have to do," Peter whispered, diving inside. He held his breath as heavy footsteps approached the shed. Mr. McGregor peered inside, muttering to himself, "I know that little rabbit is in here somewhere." Peter stayed as still as a stone. A moment later, Mr. McGregor sighed and walked away, grumbling about pesky rabbits. As soon as the coast was clear, Peter crept out of the watering can and tiptoed toward the exit. But just as he was about to leave, he spotted something hanging on a fence, his little blue jacket and shoes. In his fright, he had lost them earlier while running. Peter longed to retrieve them, but just then, he saw Mr. McGregor returning. There was no time to waste. He turned and ran as fast as his little legs could carry him. He squeezed under the gate, darted through the meadow, and didn't stop running until he reached home. Mrs. Rabbit took one look at her exhausted son and sighed. "Peter, where are your jacket and shoes?" she asked. Peter, too tired to answer, simply flopped down on the soft burrow floor. His mother shook her head but smiled gently. "I suppose you have learned your lesson." While Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail enjoyed a delicious supper of berries and cream, poor Peter was sent to bed early with nothing but a dose of chamomile tea to soothe his nerves. And from that day on, Peter Rabbit never again ventured into Mr. McGregor's garden, at least, not when he thought he might get caught. The end.